So I'm going to start recording the meeting and we can get started. Good evening again, everyone. This is the second and final for this series of information sessions for the new open cycle of the Heritage Barn Rehabilitation Grant Program. My name is Moira Nadal. I am the Preservation Programs Director here at the Washington Trust. We have also on the call our Executive Director, Chris Moore, and I see Michael Hauser from DAP. So if you don't know my name, you might know one of theirs. But we wanted to take the opportunity to walk people through the application because there's a lot of information. And if you have applied in a previous year, the web application looks a little bit different this go around. We've changed some things up. So we'll walk you through the application and have opportunities where we'll probably pause every couple of sessions, every couple of sections within the application to give an opportunity for people to ask questions. But if you have questions that you don't want to hold on to while I'm presenting, please feel free to put them in the chat. Or if you can hold on to them, raise your hand or try to unmute when we come to a designated question and answer time. And I will ask that everyone stay on mute while I'm presenting, just because it helps to avoid a lot of echoes and background noise. So let me start with sharing the website. So as I hope many of you know, the Heritage Barn Rehabilitation Grant Program is a state-funded state grant program. So it is a program of DAHP, which is Washington's State Historic Preservation Office, and we at the Washington Trust contract to handle the administration of the grant program. So I'll take you to our website because part of that includes that the applications will come in online through our website. So Preservoir is it. You'll see a big, beautiful barn. Know you're in the right place. And I'll sort of walk you through the website. This page, which is, you can see the hyperlink here, and probably Chris will put it in the chat, is your first stop. So this is sort of your starting point, either to learn more about the Heritage Barn, to collect the materials that you need, and ultimately to apply. So we have information about the history of the barn program. And Chris, I know because I messed this up last time, will you give me a thumbs up that my screen is sharing correctly this time? Okay, phew, that's a relief. So we are in the 2025-2027 biennium, which is the funding cycle for this. So applications are currently open, but you do have time still to apply, plenty of time. We will be closing the application portal at right before midnight on Sunday, October 19th. So basically everything you should need is on our website. The guidelines and procedures is probably the most important second step. So let me take you to those. And I'll zoom it to make it a little bit easier to see. So this is a dense document, but worth taking some time with. It should answer most of your questions. I know the first couple times I went through it, I just printed it out and highlighted and took notes on it. So again, a little bit of information about the background. It gives information about eligibility. We have had a number of questions from people who are interested in the grant already about whether or not they need to already have completed the registration process to be a Washington Heritage Barn. You do not, but when you apply for the grant, you should have already applied to be put it in the register, even if you haven't completed the process. So get the ball rolling, reach out to Michael Hauser, make sure that your building is one that could be listed in the Washington Heritage Barn Register, and have submitted your application when you submit your grant application, and those can run concurrently as long as it is eligible, presumably to be registered at the next available date. So your building needs to be historic, right? Historic and recognized and designated in a formal way and in need of repair. So we have eligible projects. All of these kinds of things are laid out in this document, and it's really worth going through it all. We have information about the kinds of standards that we use to evaluate um, what is compatible work that's appropriate for a historic building or structure. And all of that is kind of laid out here. So you don't have to come in already knowing that information. We try to explain it to you and make it easily available. So once you've gone through this 23-page document and you feel comfortable, you'll come back to our website and look at what's next. So how to apply. So this application, I'll ask you not to go straight to the application at the bottom, but to take a little time here, and then we'll break for questions, Chris, unless you want to already. I see you came off mute.
The only question I would have for folks, and you can do it by raising your hand or writing in the chat, is does everybody have a barn that is already listed or designated as a state heritage barn? Or I should say it the other way, if you don't, let us know that as well.
How do you want them to let you know? Raise the hand, put it in the chat.
You can just put it in the chat. And I think at the end of the day, we'll talk about this more when we get into the application, when Moira gets into it. But just to be clear, if your barn is not yet listed, you still can apply for a grant. You just need to submit that nomination, as Moira mentioned, concurrently. I see there's a few that have not yet been registered, so I will also include links in the chat to the nomination form and information about that as well. At the end of this, if you have more questions about the Heritage Barn Register and how to nominate your barn, we can go through those questions toward the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are really hoping that this information session is both informative and helpful. So if you've already started to look through some of these things and know you have questions, you've got us all here. We're happy to answer. So I'll return back to our website. You'll see that the first hyperlink is for that guidelines and procedures document, which you should already be familiar with, but if you missed it on the first landing page, it's not too late. And then application you'll need to complete all in one go. So I really encourage you on your own end to find a way to organize all of your files and information in one place, because you'll need to be able to get bids or potential scopes of work from having contractors, photographs, information about the property, answers to the questions, a proposed budget. There are a lot of moving parts, and once you get into the application, you'll need to be able to answer all the questions and upload all of the photographs and upload all of the documents in one go and submit. There is not an option to save and come back to it and do it in pieces. So just a piece of housekeeping, I do recommend that you sort of do a dry run on your own end before you file it. And to that end, we've made a Word document that you can use as your scratch paper while you're getting all of your pieces together. So when you click on this link for the barn grant application template, it will automatically download a Word document. As you can see, I've done this a couple of times. So hopefully that's still showing. Somebody give me a thumbs up. You should see a Word document. Nope. All right. Thank you. Let's try. How about now? I see a nodding head. All right. We're in business. When I'm sharing, I can't see what you see. So nodding and shaking is really, really helpful because I can see you all if you have your camera off. So the application Word document template should look pretty familiar. We formatted it to be kind of similar to the guidelines, but don't confuse the two. So again, it has this cover page with like the most important information, contact information for myself and our grants coordinator. If you're really in a pickle, if you have need for help, or if you have questions, you can email us or call. So I'll walk through the application. Some of it is intuitive. I'll try to point out what we've noticed to be like regular points of confusion. So again, another opportunity to get that guidelines document, kind of emphasizes how important it is. Um, the barn or farm name, if you've recently purchased the barn, you may have renamed it, but you know that it previously had another name or a historic name. The barn's address, sometimes people are applying for a barn that's not at the same address where they reside. The geographic coordinates you can get from Google Maps. You try your best to get the parcel number in the legal description. This is usually at your county recorder's office or in your deed. Um, we'll have a link to your Washington State Legislative District. These are public funds from a public agency, and we are really trying to get them spread throughout the state. So it really helps us to see all of the counties and legislative districts and all of the places where we're able to move this money around. Sometimes, and this can happen, sometimes you are applying for the, oh, Chris, we have people in the waiting room. So, isn't it all? Sometimes you are applying for a grant for a barn that's not yours, but you have rights to it. You have a long-term lease, you have a memorandum of understanding with the owner, you have the owner's written permission, not only to use the barn, but to enter into the grant agreement and to do work to the barn. So you might notice that there's an opportunity to put your name and the owner name in case they're different, and you can provide us with that form if you have it. So am the owner, not the owner, but have been authorized, you'll have options. These that are sort of colorful will be click options online. We'll need to be in touch with you maybe during the application process, but certainly when it comes time to notify. So, let us know the best way to get in touch. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget, but I don't know your barns. You might already be registered, you might be a previous grantee from a couple of cycles back, but I'm new and I don't know your barn. So I need you to help me to get to know it in this application, myself and the entire review committee. So there are going to be a number of us who don't know it and need to understand it. So how big is the barn? You do your best guess, but an 18-foot by 40-foot shed is pretty different from a 20 by 30, right, in terms of its overall shape. So do your best guesses as you can. Let us know what you're using it for. Let us know what you think it's been used for. And again, here's to that designation question. So do your best. If you know that your barn is listed in the National Register or in the Washington State Register, in the Heritage Register, let us know. And if it's pending, you can make us a little comment to say not yet registered, application pending. Fine. Then, in the same vein, we need you to do a condition assessment because if you'll remember, being registered and being in need of repair are sort of the two big characteristics of what makes a building eligible for this grant program, right? So if your barn is in perfect condition, but you don't like the way it looks, it's not a good candidate for a historic preservation grant program, right? The idea here is to help to preserve, conserve, and update, keep, or put back into agricultural use these historic barns throughout the state. So go through and just let us know. Like the foundation seems to be level, dry, no cracks, in good shape, but the sill plates that sit upon it are rotted out, right? Like maybe the water is pooling there, those are rotted. So go piece by piece through your building and give us a sense of where things stand. And keep in mind that when you're developing your scope and your proposal for what you're going to apply for the grant, if you tell us that your roof, both the sheathing and the structure are poor and failing, but you apply for exterior siding and windows, the committee will wonder why. Why are you applying for something that's not your most urgent need, right? So sort of what you're setting up should also align with the scope that we see later on down the line. So give us a description, barn maintenance and repair. Sometimes if you grew up in the community where the barn is, or it's been in your family for some generations, and you know that your uncle replaced half of the framing in the 70s because it was half rotted, and now you're coming to repair or replace the other half. That's really helpful context for us to know when we're trying to understand the building. Sometimes your barn's a mystery, maybe more times than not. That's fine. So I think let's pause here before we get into the nitty gritty of what you're going to give us for your project proposal and see if there are any questions yet about these earlier parts of the application.
I haven't had any questions in the chat, but if people have any that they want to just raise their hand and ask verbally, we can consider those.
And if you don't know how to raise your hand, just come off mute. And I think I see some people typing, so we'll give it a few more seconds just to see if anything comes through. Okay, there will be more opportunities for questions down the line. Nothing coming in, Chris?
Nothing that I see. We're good.
Great. Let's hit section 6. So this is a very meaty part of the application, right? You've given us a sense of who you are, what your relationship is to the barn, a little bit about the barn so we can begin to understand it and what kind of shape it's in. Now, why we're all here, right? This is a rehabilitation grant. So what work are you trying to do? We are having you put the work into 4 main areas. Give it your best guess, but we, on the administrative side, it helps us to sort of keep track of everything if we have the work sort of lumped into 4. So you might be applying for roof replacement, structural stabilization, exterior rehabilitation, or interior. You might be applying for 2 out of the 4, 3 out of the 4, 1, or all of them, and that's fine. Maybe all of your work falls into one category. You'll describe your work, especially if it's in any phases, right? So we're going to take down what's on the roof. We're going to do a structural assessment. We're going to do repairs that are necessary, and then we're going to install the new roofing material, right? Those are sort of 4 phases within a type of work. And it helps us to understand like what kinds of help you need at the different stages. So you'll give us a sense of, you know, I know with my planting schedule or with the frost, it's not going to happen until this date or that date. Give us a sense, if you have it, of what the time frame is for these things to happen, and give us a sense of the cost. So the cost you will get in most cases from having some contractors or craftsmen or tradespeople come out and give assessments. If you do this kind of work and plan to do it on your own barn, you know, you can give an estimate of the cost of the materials by putting some, you know, price sheets together from your local lumber yard or from Home Depot or whatever the case may be. But we want to see where the numbers come from. If you are awarded the grant, which contractor you work with might change from who put together the bid in your application. Your scope of work might change ever so slightly from when you apply to when you get under contract. But we are going to need the number to be as good as you can get it, because we work off of that number to give the grant award, right? So you can build in some contingencies, but it's one of the less flexible pieces of the puzzle when it comes to developing your contract. You can always use less of your grant, but you can't usually get more. So spend some time trying to get some people out and show your work, right? So let us know how you kind of figured out that. And I think, Chris, it might make sense now to switch into the worksheet. So I'll stop sharing, except I'm going to show you what I mean by worksheet. So back to this application page on the website, right? This is how we got to the template that we're looking through, the Word document. The next hyperlink in the next paragraph is the cash and in-kind match worksheet. So you click on this, and it will take you to this document that you can fill out. And I'll pass it to Chris, and he can walk you through how you would do that.
Let me unmute myself first. That's always helpful. I'm going to screen share, and great. Just give me a nod if everyone can
Looks
see
good.
that. You can see it. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to put my full screen back up. Okay, so this is the worksheet that we'll have everybody fill out. It is, when you're doing the application, you'll download this as a separate document, you'll fill it out, and then you will upload it to the online application form with the rest of your documents. So this is one to download first. Don't just open it and fill it out. Actually download it to your computer, and then you can complete it. You can save it in your in whatever application file you're creating with all your other documentation. And then again, once you have all that information, that's the time to go to the application online and fill out everything at once. So the worksheet is exactly that. It shows us what your costs are going to be, what your anticipated income for those costs will be as well, broken out by your actual grant request. And
Chris,
then,
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could you zoom this to like 150
oh,
so that the numbers are legible? I don't know about other people, but I'm having a really
sure.
hard
How's
time.
that? Is that better?
A little bit more.
How's that? One more?
Better. That's good.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Hopefully that's better to be able to see. So I've just put up an example here that is probably the most simple. As you can see, we have the work elements that Moira identified: roof replacement, structural stabilization, exterior rehabilitation, and interior rehabilitation. So all your work will fit into one of those four categories. Very simple example. Let's say you plan to do a roof replacement and it's going to cost $20,000. With the match requirement, you can ask for a grant of $10,000 and you have to match that with your own funds of $10,000. And again, that match can come in either a cash or donated form, and we'll talk more about donated labor and services later. But this is as simple as it would be. I've got $20,000 in expenses. My income's going to be $10,000 in state grant funds, and then $10,000 in my own cash. So you see total income is equal to total expenses, and we have our grant amount requested being equal to this column here. Please note that the grant request must be, what you include in this number, must be 50% of your total income or 75,000, whichever is less. And that's because 75,000 is the largest grant award we'll give. So it's okay to have an overall project that might be a $200,000 project, but the largest grant would only be 75,000. So let me add another element in here. Let's say you were going to also do some structural stabilization, and that was going to cost $10,000. You could then add another $5,000 in your grant with a note that you're also adding $5,000 in proposed cash match. We still have total expenses of $30,000 equaling total income of $30,000, and the grant's broken down between $15,000 in grant dollars and $15,000 in match. Now, what are these other columns? The in-kind matching.
Oh, Chris,
Yeah.
so you had mentioned before the 15 grant request and the 10 grant request matching, but you can, if you know you only need 10, you could ask for 10, but at this point you could also ask for up to 15 in grants, right? If your
Oh,
expenses
sorry.
were
Yeah, I just
30.
didn't change that number. Yes. So
So you
this
can
is where
ask for
you
less, but that's the maximum you could ask for in this scenario.
Right. So from this standpoint, our grant request is 15,000, and we fill in the total grant amount requested field for 15,000. What are these other two columns? I'll start with in-kind matching first. As we mentioned, your match can be cash, but it doesn't have to be. It can also come in the form of donated labor, donated materials, or donated equipment even. For instance, let's say you've got a neighbor or you yourself has a piece of equipment like a cherry picker or something like that that allows you to get up high for roof work or window replacement or whatever it might be. If someone is willing to loan you that piece of equipment for a week, we can take the value of what it would have cost to rent a comparable piece of equipment, and that will count as in-kind match for you. So let's say for structural stabilization, you think it's going to be $10,000 in construction costs, but 5,000 of that's going to be provided by folks helping with their donated labor or perhaps donated equipment. So then we would put 5,000 in here and we still get the same total numbers. You can still ask for a $15,000 grant. We just note that part of your match is proposed to be in kind. So let's add one more element in here. Let's say you also had, I'm going to do it this way, $5,000 of exterior rehabilitation work. But let's say that work was done prior to you applying for the grant, and that's what prior capital expenditures means. So you'll be applying for the grant in October, but if you spent money or did work to the barn after July 1st of this year, and that work is historically appropriate and you include it in your grant application, you can actually count those dollars or that work as part of your match. So in this instance, we're now saying we've got a total of $35,000 in construction costs. We've got a $15,000 grant. We've got $10,000 in cash match. We've got $5,000 in in-kind matching. And then you've got $5,000 in prior capital expenditures. So you can actually work on, but so you see we've got total expenses of $35,000, total income of $35,000. You can actually now ask for a grant up to $17,500 because it's half of $35,000. That means we can sort of work around some of the other requests here and change up some of the numbers so that your total grant amount requested actually ends up being matching the expenses and income that you have. So I'm just going to play with the numbers real quick so I come to the right amount here. So if you have prior capital expenditures, you're not asking for any additional grant dollars on that front, but you might ask for additional grant dollars here. And so this is where you can start to play around and use, well, now this is increasing this way, but you can start to play around and see where prior capital expenditures can come into play for grants as well. And I'm gonna make my life easier and just erase some of these so that it's an easier number to work with. So let's say we had it from this standpoint and you were using the prior capital expenditures, you could actually increase your grant request on this side of the ledger to, I'm not doing my math very well, but to 15,000 if we get up to 10,000 here, and then you had prior capital expenditures of 5, 15. I think we're getting close to everything working out now. So this shows a situation where you would have 30,000 in overall expenses. Of those expenses, 5,000 were done prior to working on the exterior work, and so you can work out a grant that has prior capital expenditures included as well. I'll go back to just the basic of.
Chris, did you mention the time period in which you can do those prior capital expenditures?
Yes. So that time period would be after July 1st of this year and any time prior to the grant contract being executed. So that's the time frame. And the idea is if you're involved in a project right now that's historically appropriate, you can count those dollars toward your project moving forward. The reason why the important thing to remember is the state can only reimburse grant dollars that are expended after a contract is in place, which is why we have this prior capital expenditures column. The state cannot reimburse money you've already spent before getting a grant contract. And then the second big thing to keep in mind, and I know Moira mentioned this, is the state can only reimburse actual cash expenditures. So back in that situation where you've got um, uh, some in-kind money coming in. Obviously, in this case, we're reimbursing the cash that's expended and not the in-kind matching, and not that donated labor, not those donated services. So those are the two things to remember, and it's all written out as well in the guidelines, but the state can only reimburse money that's spent after the contract is in place, and the state can only reimburse actual cash expenditures.
And
So
match money goes in first, right? So the state can only start to expense you once you've met your match threshold.
correct. And that is another important point. These are reimbursement grants, which means the dollars must be spent. Then you submit your reports, and then the state will reimburse you up to the grant amount. So they're reimbursement only, which means the money does need to be fronted. Now, the state can make progress payments. So if you do, say, the roof replacement first in this two-phased example here. If you were to do the roof replacement first, you could go ahead then, after its completion, submit the documentation, show the invoices, show proof of payment. We'll do a site visit, or you'll submit pictures showing you've done the work the way you said it was going to be done, and then you can get reimbursed for your grant portion related to the roof replacement, with the key being that the grant dollar needs to be the first dollar in. So if you did all of the work, $20,000 of roof replacement, you would get reimbursed $10,000. Let's say you only did $10,000 of the roof and you needed a progress payment to do the rest of the work. You could submit a progress payment for that first 10,000, but you'd only be reimbursed 5,000 at that point, because again, the match dollar is the first dollar in. And then once you finish the roof, you'd be reimbursed the other 5. And then you can move to structural stabilization, do that work. And once that's complete, now you're reimbursed the 5,000 in grants for that work element, and your project is complete. So there's some nuances to that, and we will go over this with folks who do receive grants. We hold a whole other webinar where we talk entirely about sort of contracting and reimbursements and that sort of thing. But I'll stop now. Any questions people might have? I'm going to catch up in the chat when I turn it back over to Moira, and I'll do some more responses in the chat. But if folks have any questions on this worksheet. Oh, is the chat up to speed? Great. If the chat's up to speed, fantastic. If you have any other questions on this worksheet, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty easy to use, but happy to answer any questions on the worksheet or on how reimbursement works. Okay, great. Then, Moira, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. I know that the worksheet part of it, well, it intimidates me sometimes, but hopefully that explanation helped everyone. And again, if you think of questions later, like if you're still digesting, you just let us know when in the chat or when you get to it. Okay, so we were in this Word document. So now what we're asking for is going to make sense. So the one-to-one match, the project total, the cash match, the in-kind worksheet. That's what we just went through with Chris. And you can put some experience and qualifications for your contractor, like, oh, my contractor has worked on a historic barn before. My contractor has been involved with a barn grant project before. That's really helpful for all of us to know. I think I mentioned before, these are public funds, right? State legislative allocation, state program. There should be a public benefit, right? So historic preservation isn't just for the private owner, but for all of us to see and learn from. So we need to understand if the public can see your barn. So you'll, stand on the road where you can see it and send a picture and tell us, visible from Main Street. If it's not visible from the public right of way, you might mention we participate twice a year in the Garden Club's free community house tour, right? And it includes the barns and the buildings. Let us know if there are alternative public access that you're using. If your barn is not visible from a road or a public street of some kind. And we consider all of that. So, if you're not visible, but you make the property reasonably accessible, that's great to know. You'll have to record a preservation easement. So we will give you a draft document for a period of time from 5 to 15 years, depending on the number of grant dollars you receive, as sort of an insurance, right? So the preservation easement, you will take it to your county recorder's office, have it recorded as part of your deed, and it will time out and expire at the end of its term. And it will say that you need to have future work reviewed by the Washington Trust or by Michael Hauser at DAP, that you won't immediately demolish the building after the state has just invested $75,000. And so it sort of gives some protections, right? It's a rehabilitation preservation grant program. So to ensure that for a number of years after the fact, work that you continue to do on the property is compatible with the historic nature of the barn. So it's a requirement of the program. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't want to." Well, it's one of the trade-offs with getting the grant. So you'll let us know. I guess it says if you say no, thank you to the easement, we won't be able to consider your application. So attachments, right? So you might get bids. You might have product sheets like, "Oh, my roofer wants to use this proposed roofing material," or that. You might have a number of different documents, PDFs, screenshots. So upload those all into one place. Again, we don't know your barn, so we want photographs. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, I have a leak," and they send a photo really close up in the one corner of their barn, and I can see exactly what kind of damage the water is making, but I don't know what corner of the barn it is, and I don't know what the building looks like. So having a mix of overall photos and some detailed shots, especially if there's a specific side of the barn you're going to work on, let us see what it looks like overall, and then give us a couple extras on that one side so we can see the condition. We have some good before images to hopefully hold up against a very successful after image. And if you're not the owner of the barn, but you have permission from the owner to be doing this work, we'll want to see something in writing that gives you that authorization. If you're a nonprofit, maybe you're a local historical society or something to that effect, we'll want to see your list of your board and some information about that. Then you're basically it. You're gonna digitally sign it and hit submit. So let's see what that looks like. So we're back to the Barn Grants application website page where we've gone through all of these documents and we have embedded the online application. So this is the online application. It's a digital form. So you'll take everything that you put into your Word document and basically copy and paste it in here. So you'll click into the field you want to type into and go from there. When you need to, so remember we said the color coded are clickers, and when you need to upload, you will, hope this scrolling doesn't make it easy for anyone, you will either drag and drop it from that online folder you created where you've been collecting your bid, collecting your photos, saving your Word doc, putting everything in one place. You could just drag and drop it here or find it on your computer. Then you'll just keep scrolling Sometimes, depending on the screen you're looking at, um, the application and the web page will end at the same place. But sometimes you have to scroll more on one or the other, but you'll know you've arrived when you see the submit button. So pretty straightforward. It just takes some work up front to make sure you spend some time on the guidelines, get all your ducks lined up and organized, spend a little bit of time, doing your rough draft of your worksheet and your application in the Word document. And then this is the final easy part where you kind of just plug in everything you've been spending some time working on. So I think I will stop sharing unless someone has a specific question about one of these forms so that we can all see each other. And we've got like a little over 15 minutes for any questions or anything you want us to go back over if we went through something too quickly and you feel like you want to hear it again or it didn't make sense, let us know.
Hi, my apologies for showing up late. My computer decided to add some changes and it took longer. Quick question, and if you've covered this, my apologies. Do you have resources for these said contractors?
I was working on that right before we got into this meeting.
Okay.
Judith, were you in my computer? Is that what the updates
No.
were? You were seeing what I was
No.
working on? So we can't vouch really officially for contractors, but we have been pulling together a list of contractors who have worked on previous barn projects, let's say. So I know it's in the FAQ. Let me show you how to find that.
Okay.
I'll put the link in the chat as well.
Perfect. And just think, I'm a visual learner. Maybe it's not helpful for other people, but you're on the main landing page. You scroll down, you got to the application, you saw the guidelines, FAQ. We have an FAQ with lots of questions and answers to the most typical questions, and a link to the contractors list is in here, as well as in the chat that Chris is going to show. It's a very common question.
Yeah, and just to follow up on it, it says it on the site, but obviously we encourage everyone to do their research about contractors as well. This is just a list of contractors who have worked on barns as part of other projects or that we know of, but we don't we release all liability or anything like that for them. So we don't claim any responsibility for their performance or not. It's I just want to be clear about that. We encourage everyone to make sure they are asking the questions and getting a chance to meet with folks, but it is at least a resource.
And I heard, I think Zoom user came off mute in the green shirt. Did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was wondering more about the easement around the building. Does it go around the building? How far? Can you explain that?
It runs with the land, so it is the property, right? The property including the barn that's on it.
Okay.
Is that enough of an answer?
Yeah, I assume so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like a what am I trying to say? It's not like a utility easement or something like that where there's something physical that's going to run across your property. It's literally saying that you will treat the barn in a historically appropriate way, and it applies to the exterior of that barn, so that you don't do anything that would cause it to be essentially delisted or ineligible for listing in the Heritage Barn Register for the period of the easement. And again, the easement periods are between 5 and 15 years, depending on the amount of grant awards received. A grant under 20,000 is a 5-year easement. A grant over 50,000 is a 15-year easement, and then 10 for everything in between. There is, with an easement, there is active monitoring of those. So the way we monitor those easements is on an annual basis. Once a year, we ask all past grantees to submit online current images of the barn and a quick, and when I say quick, I mean it's a very quick sort of just form that asks if you made any changes, if so, what were they, and then images to show the current condition. An easement does not mean you can't make changes to the barn in any way, shape, or form. It just means if you do make them, they need to be historically appropriate. And during the term of the easement, we ask folks to reach out to us with any proposed changes. If you're planning to fix a board or fix a window, do you need to contact us to do that? No, not at all. This is only about if a substantial change were going to be proposed, like you wanted to add an L, or you wanted to add a lean-to shed or something like that.
Yeah. Or I saw someone put in the chat, I'm applying for a roof. I know that needs to come first, but my windows are not in great shape. And so, I know, Robin, it's you. But if you don't apply for the grant to do that, but you hit the big one and you're rolling in money and you decide to do that on your own, you would submit the windows or the repair guide or whatever it is. If it's repair or replacement, you would submit that to us and we would review that and say, yes, those windows make sense for your barn age and style, or we suggest you explore options in this area of style of window instead. A resource for historically appropriate changes. So it's not the most straightforward. Michael Hauser did develop a guidance, which I think is being maybe updated, about roofs because we get so many roof projects. But largely, the last 2 pages of the guidelines include information about the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. And so it's not specific, like, do this, but it gives you a sense of how we are evaluating and considering it, right? Are you keeping sound material as much as you can and repairing it until it needs replacement, or are you proposing to immediately replace everything, even if it's in like pretty good but not perfect shape? Are you considering the age and the style of the building while you're proposing your scope and your changes, right? You wouldn't do a lot of the exact same things to a barn that you might do to a historic church, right? Probably your barn shouldn't have stained leaded glass windows in it. So if you propose those, we might go, well, that's not compatible with the history of this building, the style and the age and the use. And so that's kind of how we're considering those things, if that helps to make sense. I'm not a tastemaker, so I'm not, I always say when I would review a lot of residential stuff, I don't really care what color you paint your house, but I do care about the way that you prepare the surface and the quality of the paint that you're using, right? So it's much more on the like technical side than the aesthetics taste-making side. We want to help you to avoid doing harm or damage to your buildings since we're, well, no one's more of an expert on historic barns than Hauser, but we're trying to follow in his footsteps. Were you going to say something, Chris?
I was just going to respond. Megan in the chat wrote, is there a resource for historically appropriate changes? And I did in the chat, I can put it in there again, but I did in the chat include a link to the anatomy of a barn that Michael put together. I think that can kind of help because it highlights different elements that we consider to be character defining. And that's really kind of the idea around it, is that you want to have, you want to retain those character defining features. And so that barn guide that Michael put together, I think does a really good job of doing that. The Secretary of Interior standards that we've referenced are kind of the grand sort of mantra about how you should treat historic buildings. And I will say, and I'll let Michael jump in if he wants to add anything to this, but in short, what we kind of talk about with the term rehabilitation, which means a very specific thing. So when we talk about barn rehabilitation, it has a specific definition, but basically Where you have original historic fabric, we want to repair that fabric if at all possible. If that original historic fabric is deteriorated to the point that it cannot be repaired, then we look to replace it in kind. And that's pretty much the cardinal rules to kind of go by. Michael, are we missing anything on that? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I guess sounds great. Absolutely. You're right on the spot.
And we got a question about accessing the updated roof guidance. I think, Michael, we can give a spoiler here that it has to do with the difficulty that we're seeing really consistently over a number of years with people being able to source 3-tab shingle for replacement materials. So unless that's what you're proposing, the link that we included is for you the up-to-date information.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got 7 more minutes.
Oh yeah, I see Maura. Sorry, I see you already updated it. I was going to respond to Robin's question about metal roofs and whether you use plywood or not with a metal roof. I think the answer is it'll depend, and the contractor, that's something they'll work on as well. But keep in mind that plywood does act as a good diaphragm and actually gives some structural stability to the building to a degree. So if you are using plywood over the skip sheathing and then putting the final roof layer over that, it will give you some more rigidity. But you also want to consider weight as well. And so plywood is heavy, and if the barn is lightly framed, then you may not want that. There may be other ways to get that stability. So it's really interesting, and Michael can attest to that. I've walked into a lot of barns in this state, and some I've walked in and said, how is it still standing? Because it's so lightly framed. Others I've walked into and I've said, I could run my truck into this and it's not coming down because it's so over-engineered, so to speak, or so heavily constructed. So we see all sorts.
Yeah.
I
Wide
want
variety.
to. Oh, sorry, Hauser, what was that?
Oh, I was going to say, yes, it's a wide variety out there. It's to each seems like a different condition to each one.
I want to show something that I forgot to show at the beginning of the webinar, which I think might be a good piggyback onto what Chris said. And then, Chris, I want us to read out Sandra's clarified question and the answer. But let me just show you. So when you get to that first web page, right, before you get to the application, at the bottom we have photographs, not additional information, but name, county, and photographs of barns from this immediate preceding grant cycle. I think it is worth seeing that they are in a variety of styles, a wide variety of conditions, and in a variety of agricultural uses, right? So we have a fruit barreling plant, we have a number of barns, we have a scale house. I think sometimes people would drive by this and say, oh, that looks to be in great condition. I don't need to apply for a grant. Well, it may have problems we don't see, and they might see a building like this one and think, oh, that's so far gone, let's just demolish it. But these are all properties that have received barn rehabilitation grants and are successfully moving through the program. And it really takes a lot for a building to be actually too far gone. You know, we are happy to be involved in like the stabilization of a barn so that it can be further rehabilitated down the line. And maybe this just needs a new roof and a little bit of framing and not that much other work, but it looks really dramatic. So, you know, I don't want people to be too discouraged by their barn looking like it's in great condition or in poor condition, because past grantees are really quite a mix. And then there was questions. So we had mentioned previously that, I just want to read it out for everyone. We had mentioned previously that $75,000 is the maximum award per grant, right? So you can apply for up to $75,000. the state legislature has allocated about 900,000 for this funding cycle. So there's enough money to go around. It kind of depends. If we get really compelling applications and everyone's asking for 75,000, there will be fewer grants that we can fund. But that's usually not the case. It usually runs a real gamut. I would say a lot of grants average around 25 to 40,000, so not that full grant amount. And part of why we ask you to explain the condition of the barn and all of the work elements and kind of the phases of them is that the committee has the ability to partially fund a grant project. So Robin, I'll keep calling on you. They might say, Robin's roof costs 60,000 and the windows are 15. We're going to do a grant award for 60 and we're going to use that 15 for someone who needs it for something else. And maybe she could come back in a future round and apply for the windows. And we know probably in 2 or 3 more years, she's also going to need the siding or something like that. So sometimes the committee will partially fund it when they can understand what the pieces are, the urgency of them, and the order that they happen in. And that helps to spread the money around to more properties and to more regions of the state. So hopefully that helps to answer that. Okay, last call. We got 2 minutes left for any questions, but I'll put in here our grants inbox email. If you have a question that you think of after the meeting, please do feel free to email that there. And if you have questions about the Heritage Barn Register, Michael Hauser is michael.hauser@dap.wa.gov. I think I have it memorized. Okay. So that's also in the chat. And yes, we'd love to see pictures if you have questions or you're not sure about something. The grants email inbox is a great place to send those, so we can start to give you a beginning impression.
And I would just say to Judith's question as well, remember, there's several components to historic significance. Certainly the design and what the barn looks like is one of those components, but it's also the story. And we want people to give as much information they can about the history or the story. For example, you might have what to you, it seems like a small little barn, but maybe it is a type that is relatively rare, or maybe it's on a farm that was really instrumental in the development of agriculture in a specific county. So that history, not just of the design of the barn, but that story of the barn over the years as well, is a compelling part of this, and certainly can be part of that significance. So maybe it was at one point the property of a prominent a prominent farmer, a prominent person in ag, and it's the only thing left that is on that farm. That can be part of its significance as well. So don't worry about just we don't want to get too hung up on looks, because there are other things at play.
And also, it's okay if it's not the last remaining barn of the most important agricultural guy in your county. Sometimes what's really special about the barn is how ordinary it is. You might have a barn where you go, oh my God, these are all over Kittitas County. Well, great. Maybe your barn is a perfect example of this type that's all over your county. And the significance of it is that it can be like the great case study for it, So I would always say apply and let the committee tell you no. Don't self-select out. We want to see applications. And there have been projects where people, to Judith's questions, where the owner didn't think it was significant or thought that it was structurally too risky or too far gone. And the committee was really excited about the project and really enthusiastic to fund it at the full ask. So, go through the process, put your best foot forward, and, we're able to fund, I think, generally about half of the applications that we get. to some degree, whether in full or partial.
Yeah, the number that's going to depend on how many applications we receive and how much money is ultimately available. We might actually have a little bit more than 900,000. That's yet to be determined, but the last round we were able to do about half. There have been rounds where it's been closer to 20 or 25% of applicants, but it just depends on how many applications we receive.
So we're a little over time. I want to thank you all so much again for joining. I know it's a lot of information to take in, but if you leave with one thing, just remember to check our website. A lot of this information's on the website. Plenty is answered in the FAQ, and worst case, send us an email, and we will put up this recording or the one from last week, maybe both. We have to see what the capacity is on the website, but one of these recordings that runs through the application and where everything is on the website will go onto our website. So when you get to that landing page, you'll also see it there, and you can have it as a refresher if you need that while you're preparing your application materials. So we're here to help and trying to make it, it's a lot of information that we need, but we're trying to make it hopefully as straightforward of a process as it can be. And thank you so much to Michael Hauser, our barn expert, for joining today. It's really helpful to have you on the call.
Problem.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.